So I was having a conversation tonight that really gave me an idea for a video to do. So here we are to talk about the man that everybody loves to hate, Rob Zombie. Hey, what is up, everybody? It's Nick here from the Lost River Drive-In, and as you can see, we're going to be talking about Rob Zombie tonight, but specifically, Rob Zombie's best movie. Now, this isn't a video about me saying this is the best movie and this is why. No, we're going to go through each one of his movies, aside from The Haunted World of El Superbeasto, and give reasons for why people could say this is his greatest movie. Now, this conversation got started earlier because Christian and I were actually talking about what Rob is going to do next. And we both really want him to direct another movie. And anybody that's a Rob Zombie fan doesn't want to see him go out on the Munsters. That's not to say that the Munsters isn't enjoyable for what it is, but that's not really Rob's wheelhouse. I want to see Rob come back with teeth, and I just want to see him do something. So when we were talking about that, I got to thinking, what is Rob's best movie? And what's an argument you can make for each one of his movies being his best? So I'm going to try my best to give you that. Starting off with House of a Thousand Corpses, multiple reasons can be given as to why this is his greatest movie. Although this was his directorial debut, this movie is so Rob Zombie. From the aesthetic, to the shot composition, to the music, to the tone. It is just Rob Zombie in a nutshell. This was a perfect way for him to kick the door down. This movie is so frantic in its pacing and its editing. It is unsettling. There's so much imagery in this movie that isn't explained or isn't even really meant to make sense, but it sits with you. Whether that's Dr. Satan and his minions down below the earth, or whether that's Captain Spaulding and his over-the-top personality, or whether it's the Firefly trio, including Mother Firefly. There's so much personality there, and they're not super jokey. It's just grimy and dirty, and you're terrified. And if you were at a rest stop and you saw one of them, you would probably start saying your prayers because you know that you're going to be tortured and eaten, most likely. So House of a Thousand Corpses, if you're a fan of that grindhouse aesthetic and that style like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, this movie is a direct love letter to that movie and to that era. So if you said this was Rob's best movie, I would not disagree with you. I would be hard-pressed to find reasons to say it's not. Now, he had a movie come out later on that I'm excited to talk about, but this movie is right there neck and neck for me as his greatest movie because if nothing else, this is Rob Zombie personified. But of course, he was going to follow that up with the sequel, 2005's Devil's Rejects. Now, most critics would tell you this is Rob Zombie's greatest movie. And a lot of people, casual horror fans, will tell you the same thing. This one was probably the most well-received of any of his movies critically and by fans. It didn't make the most money, but this was really when he broke the door down into becoming a household name as a director, not just a musician. Look, The Devil's Rejects is a much more polished version of House of a Thousand Corpses, except in tone. Devil's Rejects is even more bleak than House of a Thousand Corpses. The style of House of a Thousand was more over the top and colorful, whereas all of that cynicism is still here in this movie, but it's not played for jokes or fun. It is truly just disgusting, vile human behavior. Having said that, I would say that there's a lot of characters in this movie that give better performances than they did in the first movie. I love Bill Moseley in this movie. I think he is fantastic. I think this may be Sherry Moon's best performance to date in Devil's Rejects. And you get more Captain Spaulding, and more Sid Haig is never a problem. It's also like this road movie where you're kind of rooting for these three, even though you shouldn't. And then when you get to the end, there's this vindication, and you think it's over. Obviously, we know it wouldn't end up being over, although it would have been a perfect bookend. See, Devil's Rejects is written really well, story-wise. It has great gore. It has great moments of action. It's a totally coherent movie from start to finish. So for a lot of people to say this is his best movie, objectively speaking, I'm not really going to give you pushback because I can't say that you're wrong. And I feel like this entire video is more about what do you like more and what do you like less. So there are a lot of reasons to pick Devil's Rejects. But then Rob Zombie would get the remake of Halloween in 2007. Now, I haven't heard a lot of people say this is Rob Zombie's best movie. You'd be hard-pressed, and now I'm sure somebody's commenting saying, this is actually my favorite Rob Zombie movie. And that's awesome. Look, Halloween in 2007, I don't feel like I could make the argument for it at all because it is simply, at least half of it, compromised because it is a remake of John Carpenter's film. Having said that, an argument you could make for this being his best movie is taking an iconic property that at the time was 3 decades old and giving an entire backstory to it. Whether you hated or loved the backstory, was new and in some ways was kind of genius. Now, some of it works and some of it doesn't. And as years have gone on, the first half of this movie at times really drags for me, and I feel like it's unnecessary. I'd much rather get to the light version of John Carpenter's Halloween in the second half, because it's briskly paced, it's fun, and it's just upbeat. It is what I wanted to see. So I would actually make the argument the second half of this movie is much better. And you could say, well, that's a reason for this not being the best because he's harping on John Carpenter. And that's very true. But I will say to Rob's credit in this movie, even in the second half where it is aping a lot of John Carpenter's Halloween, he puts things in different locations. People die in different ways. Certain people don't die that did die. So he did add his own flair in the second half. It's not just the first half that is Rob Zombie's movie. I like to think that Halloween 2007 as a whole truly is a Rob Zombie movie in a lot of ways. Compromised at times, but mostly a Rob Zombie movie. Having said that, I wouldn't make the argument that Halloween 2007 is the best. But if you're someone that really liked that origin story and liked the changes he made in the second half, you could make that argument. Next up is Halloween 2 from 2009. And you guys know how I feel about this movie. So I'm not going to really get into that yet. But I will tell you guys, the argument to make for this movie is, and a lot of people didn't like it when it came out because this movie was so cynical, was so dark, was so different, was completely totally different. Whereas, Rob Zombie's first movie, especially in the second half, was a light, breezy remake of John Carpenter's film. This movie goes in a completely different direction and flips everything on its head. It is all about trauma and PTSD. It is all about things not getting better. We're always used to this Hollywood ending of everything got better. And Halloween 2 is the complete opposite of that. Even from the color palette in this movie, so many colors are drained out of the film. It just is bleak. It's dreary. It is depressing throughout the entire runtime. And a lot of people will say that's why they don't like this movie. They'll also say that all the changes they made to the lore of Michael Myers and Haddonfield and Laurie Strode and whatever that may be, they did not care for it. But you could make the argument that all of those differences and that ingenuity is a reason why this is Rob Zombie's greatest movie. Then came The Lords of Salem. And I've talked to a lot of people about this that actually will argue this is Rob's best movie. The Lords of Salem was a low-budget movie that was helped along by Blumhouse, believe it or not. And it was a movie that Rob really wanted to make. There's also a book for it, which is a little more coherent than the movie. Giving Sherry Moon Zombie the lead role in this movie, especially in a movie that is so heavy in its subject matter, a lot of people were skeptical of. Let me just say, Sherry's fine. I don't think she's as good as she is as Baby, or even as Deborah Myers in Halloween 2007. But she's fine in the lead role here as Heidi. Now, Lords of Salem, a reason why a lot of people say it's the best is because the movie is gorgeous. Like, it is, the cinematography is beautiful, and I know some people hate the C word when it comes to talking about movies, but it is gorgeous. This is Rob Zombie's largest movie at times. There's also a lot of themes here and symbolism that are played upon that aren't really explained, but if you're someone that's well versed in the occult, you may pick up on some things, and it may lead to a richer experience for you. There's also just this weight hanging over this movie, and it's leading you to this third act that you just cannot wait to get to. Unfortunately, the third act is very rushed and very incoherent, in my opinion. Now, I get it. In talking to somebody like Christian, he loves that about the third act. He loves that the third act is so weird and so all over the place and nothing is really explained. I kind of hate that because I have this completionist side to me where I at least need to know enough. I don't even think you get enough in the third act of this movie. But the argument to make for this being his greatest movie is simply he tackles the occult really well. He goes back to historical events and actually kind of freaks you out at times in this movie. There's great imagery. The cinematography is gorgeous. And just like Halloween 2, really plays on this downtrodden person, this dreary atmosphere. And it's kind of awesome. Then came 31. Now, the argument to be made for this being Rob's best movie is simply that this is a shut your brain off and have a good time movie. And Rob Zombie plays really well in that sandbox of like playing on the themes and the iconography of Halloween, giving you some truly just disgusting characters that you don't like, that you want to see die or kill people. All of that is here. Again, the imagery's awesome, the gore's awesome, and there's not a lot to wrap your head around. This is a very straightforward plot. So a lot of arguments sometimes for the reason why people think that Rob Zombie is not a good filmmaker is they think that he can't tell a good story or write good dialogue. And if you go into a movie where you really don't need either of that, you might say this is Rob Zombie at his best because he didn't have to try too hard. He just gave us what he's good at and it worked. Now, for me, I don't agree with the argument that Rob Zombie can't tell a good story or write good dialogue for characters. There is cringy dialogue at times in his movies, yes, but I don't think that he's incapable of doing it. And I think he has shown that multiple times, that he can do it. So 31, while it is a fun movie, it's actually my least favorite Rob Zombie movie because there's no meat on the bone there. It is simply just, hey, look, cool, more people died. None of this really matters. And then the ending is just almost like a blatant ripoff of Devil's Rejects. He's like playing the greatest hits. And I'm like, okay, come on, Rob. So 31, you could make an argument for the simplicity of it, and I could see it. Then came 3 from Hell. Now, I don't really know anybody that could make the argument that this is Rob Zombie's greatest movie, but I will try to make one argument that I could see people making. Sid Haig was sick and passed away while this was filming. He could only film for one day. So you had to take and complete the Firefly trilogy without one of the trio. And believe it or not, Richard Brake kind of works. He kind of seamlessly fits in here. Now you could say, how did we not know about this character? Why was there no mention or anything like that? I hear you there, but giving the movie that mulligan and just going with what it's giving you, he kind of fits in there perfectly. And this movie, like 31, is just kind of shut your brain off, have fun. The difference with this one is, I feel like the budget was a bit smaller. There's a lot of CGI blood that is noticeably bad in this movie, whereas 31 was a lot of practical effects and looked really good for the most part. But the argument I guess you could make for 3 from Hell is that they brought this trilogy to a close without one of the major players. They did it in a decent enough way. So yeah, I guess I could hear that argument. And then finally is the Munsters. Now you could make the argument for the Munsters, and I could totally see it. Well, again, this is Rob Zombie at his best. Rob Zombie's a huge Munsters fan. He collects memorabilia from the original series. Like, he's a big fan. He's been wanting to do this for years. This was a passion project. Rob Zombie got this project and made it PG. Rob Zombie, of all people, made it PG. And actually had a blast with it. On a limited budget that didn't really get much fanfare at all, the sets in this movie are just oozing with atmosphere. The movie's fun. The movie is clearly a love letter to the Munsters, and you can tell the person who made it is a fan. So I could hear the argument that if you're a fan of the Munsters, this is your favorite Rob Zombie movie because in a lot of ways he did it justice. He captured a lot of the tone and a lot of the style aesthetically, and he respected it. Now, a lot of it doesn't work with people, and I'm not a huge fan of the Munsters. I think it's fun, and I think it's something I'd like to watch every October or every other October. Just for the imagery alone, I just think it's a fun time. You could watch with the family as well. But I could see people making that argument. So after going through his filmography of movies that he directed, live action movies, you could make an argument for every one of these movies. And I tried to play devil's advocate and make somewhat of an argument for each one, even if I did give my opinion a little bit here and there. I will say, though, I think objectively, Rob Zombie's best movie is Halloween 2. And I know I'm a big fan of the movie, but I think it is everything that people say Rob Zombie can't do well. I think this movie flies in the face of that. And I know that a lot of people that are big Halloween fans, and they hate Rob Zombie's movies, refuse to allow themselves to see Halloween 2 for what it is. And I can understand that bias, but I also think it's just incredibly unfair to the film and the filmmaker. The reason I think that Halloween 2 is Rob Zombie's greatest movie is because it is truly Rob Zombie's movie, but with a property that at that point, it was thought to be impossible to put your own stamp on it. How many sequels had we had to that point that had just kind of cribbed off of things that had came before it? Rob Zombie said, I'm going to take the Michael Myers you know, and I'm going to completely change him. I'm going to make him a sadistic, brutal human. You're going to get human emotion. You're going to get human noises. You're going to get the way Michael Myers would look if he was actually a wanderer. He's not just going to show up with a brand new jumpsuit, brand new mask, and he's ready to go. No, he's a hobo. Because realistically, with a lot of these Halloween movies, when he disappears, this is what the dude would look like. He's not staying in a motel and shaving his face and getting new clothes. That's just not realistic. On top of that, though, I think objectively it is his greatest movie because it shows Rob Zombie can do character development. He can give characters arcs. And he can give dialogue that will cut you to the bone. This movie is all about the unraveling of people's psyches. The people that survived from the previous movie. Laurie and Annie, best friends, right? Well, after what happened, they can't stand to be around each other. And Laurie blames herself. And I'm sure Annie blames Laurie. Because, especially after it's revealed that it's her brother. There's so much about that relationship itself that is so contentious and so juicy. You've got Sheriff Brackett trying to be a father figure to his own daughter who resents him for whatever reason, and someone that isn't his daughter, that he can't understand, that he can't seem to get through to, and that every day he's trying to protect because he's afraid that that guy is going to come back. All of that stuff is incredible. You have Laurie doing the things you should be doing. She gets a job. She has a new group of friends and a support system. Maya, who is actually a decent person that doesn't seem to be a bad influence. Harley, not so much. But Maya is a good person that doesn't necessarily seem like she wants to lead Laurie down a bad path. Laurie is in therapy. She's doing the things you're told to do after you go through traumatic events. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And that's the beauty of this movie and the beauty of this writing. And these character arcs and the development they get is that sometimes, sadly, you don't come out of it. Sometimes it's not a happy ending. Sometimes trauma can overcome you. Sometimes the demons win. And that sucks. But guess what? It's real. It's a real thing. And as much as Hollywood wants to push all the time in their movies, these happy endings, this resolution, Rob Zombie said, that is bullshit. It is not always that way. And I'm going to take your beloved characters and I'm going to put them in a movie that cynical. And some people hate that cynicism. And I get it. It's not what they wanted to see. But for me, at that point, give me something different. Give me something real. Give me characters that don't just stay stagnant. Oh no, I'm running from Michael Myers again. That's my character arc. That's my development. Halloween 2 is so much more than that in so many ways. Not to mention the technical aspects. The 16 millimeters that this was shot on, the film, it looks gorgeous, okay? The sound design, gorgeous. The gore, the effects, incredible. The music, incredible. So much, and it's so atmospheric and like industrial sounding at times, which was so different for Halloween. Rob Zombie didn't rely on anything that made Halloween Halloween for this movie. And to some people, that's the problem. To me, it's not, because you do still have Michael Myers. Even if it doesn't look and sound like a Halloween movie at times, it's a Halloween movie. And it is dripping in atmosphere. It definitely feels like it is a movie taking place at Halloween. One of the coolest things about having this channel over the years and talking about this movie specifically, and this director, has been being able to have the conversations with people like, you opened my eyes to this movie. Like, I was looking at it from the fanboy perspective. I was looking at it from I didn't want to see this. This is not the direction I wanted to go. And you opened my eyes and allowed me to look at it in a different way. And now that I do, I can see it for how it truly is and how good it is. And that is really, really cool. And to some people, they'll never, ever forgive Rob Zombie. And they'll never give this movie its flowers because it's not what they wanted. And I respect and understand that completely. But I do maintain, objectively, I think this is his greatest film, simply because of everything I said on a technical level, but mainly because it is his most coherent story with real stakes, real characters, real tragedies, dealing with real issues, real development with those characters, and real ingenuity in a franchise that at this point shouldn't have allowed for that ingenuity, and he did it anyway. I think the movie is brilliance, utter brilliance. But the larger point here is, I think Rob Zombie's a much better filmmaker than people give him credit for. The dude knows how to shoot a scene. The dude knows where to put music in and what music to use. At times, yes, some of his character dialogue in certain movies is like, I don't know about that. And that is frustrating because sometimes he has a great idea and it doesn't come across as great as it should because some of that dialogue, some of it just doesn't work. Rob just needs to tighten it up, tighten the screws. You could have a really great movie. He's had that all along. And people, so many people, have just let it go right under their noses without even noticing. And it's Halloween too. So that's it. I'm getting off my soapbox here, and I cannot wait to jump into the comment section. Comment down below. Let me know what your favorite Rob Zombie movie is and why. Or if you just hate the guy, I'm sure you'll tell me down there too. But as long as you're commenting, I'm happy. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This is Nick at the Lost River Drive-In, and I'm pulling out.